And welcome into the latest RinkWise podcast presented by New England Hockey Journal, Seamans Media, produced by the great David Yaz. I am your host, Evan Marinofsky, alongside New England Hockey Journal writer Patrick Donnelly. Pat, how you doing?
We're doing good. Trying to, wait until the playoffs, another week.
So this is your first foray in this. I remember last year it was a whirlwind year because your busy time of year is relatively short compared to a college season and definitely compared to a pro season. Have you been kind of surprised at how fast this has gone?
Yes and no. Um, it still feels like there's a long way to go. Um, but it's also, man, I feel like just yesterday I was doing preseason rankings. So a little bit of both.
I agree. I am at that point too, where I'm like, oh, there's still so much left in terms of 2 weeks left in the regular season, playoffs, and then kind of the aftermath, kind of making everything make sense. You also have the
Yeah.
MIAA, which ends in late March for the really good teams. Um, so that it's interesting. But it does fly, and then it's so interesting. It's funny because it's a nice break after, and then like festival comes around, you're like, oh, it's great to have hockey back. But then when prep and high school start up next November and next December, like I remember being at a prep game, the first prep game of the year this year with Rivers and Sebs, and I'm like, man, nothing beats this. Like no hockey throughout the rest of the year beats this time of year, and I think most people would agree with me. Um, it's not always the best on best competition, but it's always the most intense. So,
Yeah.
it's been a fun year. It's been enjoyable.
Yeah, definitely.
So, on this episode, we want to dive into we're gonna do a lot of prep. Um, with MIAA playoffs starting, we actually are gonna have two different preview episodes the next 2 weeks on prep and the playoffs for that, and then we're gonna do a look at the MIAA bracket the week after that, early that week. So we're gonna spend a lot of time though with prep in this episode because it is winding down quickly. And there is less time left in prep, so we're going to just dedicate most, if not all, of this episode to that. And we want to look at the Elite Eight favorites and some teams who might sneak in, and sort of how the landscape is looking in the Elite Eight. And uh, we'll start with the girls, Pat, because that's your thing.
Mhm.
Um, right now, Nobles is number one.
Yeah.
Williston is right behind it at two. But Phillips Andover is quickly sneaking in.
Yeah, Philip Andover's on a really big run here. So I'll just run through 1 through 8 really quick in the Elite Eight. You got Nobles, Williston, Andover, Deerfield, Loomis, Kent, Tabor, who's also on a run, and St. Paul's. Um, and then you still have, your teams in the mix at the tops of each large and small school tournament. Choate, Westminster, even Thayer, and then Groton and New Hampton still hovering around. Um, but Andover, um, I mean, fresh off a 1-1 tie with Nobles, who Nobles has tied 3 of their last 4, I believe. Kind of like last year's Bruins, just get me to the playoffs. Um, but
Please get me in.
yeah, Andover, let's see here, is unbeaten since January 17th. The tie last night ended a 10-game win streak, I believe. So they are as hot as it gets. They just tied Nobles 1-1, as we said, beat Wilson 1-0. Big revenge game from last year's Elite Eight final too, where they lost. Some of these other wins, New Hampton quality win, Tabor, Deerfield, BB&N's been really hot too. And then it's just some of the other ones like Cushing's been pesky, even though they haven't really grabbed a lot of headlines this year. I'd say the same thing about AP and Milton. Never really any easy wins, but some big time wins in this streak. And we sort of talked about Andover being in a bit of a funk at like last month, especially with some of their bigger hitters at the U18 Worlds. But everyone's back, everyone's healthy, everyone's rolling. Sarah Powers is having an awesome year. Um, I believe she's leading Andover in points, um, and has already bested her totals from last season.
Mhm.
But obviously the Avrils and Molly Boyle will grab the headlines, but what I've really been impressed with when I've seen Andover this year, is sort of that like next wave of the foot soldiers. Sarah Powers, Peyton Kennedy, Lily McInerney. They've just been kind of playing to their identity really deep, and just sort of just wreaking havoc every time they're on the ice.
Yeah, I'm not surprised Andover's kind of back in the mix. I would expect them. I mean, it seems like they're getting hot. I mean, they got everybody back at the right time. That feels like a team that's going to challenge those top two in Nobles and
Yep.
Williston when the tournament comes around. I mean, again, I don't want to look too far ahead because we're going to do a playoff preview next week, but I would love to see a Nobles Williston Elite Eight championship. I just think that the storylines, dynasty versus the new guard versus the old guard with Tom Reeser, I think that would be a phenomenal showcase of talent, and
Yeah.
just two heavyweights going mano a mano, I think would be awesome. But and I'm not trying to disparage any other team. That's the matchup I'd want to see. I think I had that as my preseason matchup. Um, in terms of the other tournaments and teams sneaking into the Elite Eight, do you foresee any of Choate or Broughton or any other team kind of meandering their way in these final weeks?
I would say at this point, the two I would give the edge to are probably Choate and Westminster.
Mhm.
At least as far as the last couple weeks have gone, um, they've been the ones who have kind of been hanging around 7 and 8, in and out with Tabor and St. Paul's. Um, Groton was in there maybe last week, one of the before the scores turned over. Um, so I would say Groton probably has a better chance than New Hampton, who I believe is better than them in the RPI. But Groton still has two more wins as opposed to a few more ties. Um, and but Choate, they have the rest of the way because they just fell to Williston, but they beat Loomis. And then the rest of the way they have Taft, Hotchkiss, and Cushing. Again, no easy wins, but if you can rattle off three in a row there, you're probably in good shape. And Westminster has Kent on the schedule, who Kent should be pretty good to make it, but Westminster has Berkshire and Lawrenceville left. So all it takes is 2-1, 3-0, and you could be right back in there, especially where um, I mentioned Tabor's on a bit of a run, but they've been pretty volatile in the second half. Um, I know offense has been kind of hard to come by. They're obviously really good on defense. They've won 5 in a row, 7 of 8. And I say scoring's been hard to come by, but they've scored 6 goals in 2 of their last 4 games. They added 4 in another one. So, I mean, they have Nobles, but then they have St. George's and Berkshire. So, barring disaster, they could be in pretty good shape. So, I would say if you're looking at a Choate, a Westminster, or a Groton, you're going to need help from others, and you're
Mhm.
going to need to also pretty have a basically perfect week.
I was gonna say it's tough for a lot of these teams, even on the boys' side, who are outside looking in the final week or two, because you can win all your games. It doesn't always matter. It comes
Yeah, you
down
need
to
it.
you need the teams above you to falter, and sometimes
Yeah,
that happens, and that's exciting for us, but it doesn't always happen. Um,
yeah. I would also look at St. Paul's at 8. They've lost 2 in a row. Tabor
mhm.
2-0, and then Exeter was a tough one because Exeter's had a really tough second half after they were in the picture in the first half. But they lost to Exeter 1-0, Tabor 2-0. And they finish with they have just one more against Proctor. So even the St. Paul's win doesn't necessarily mean they're safe, especially if any of those 3 or 4 teams on the outside have an undefeated week.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked by that either. And this leads to my next thing with you. We've talked a lot about Nobles and Williston, and I imagine in the next couple weeks, we'll write and talk about them a lot more, and we can get into them a little bit more in this episode. But in terms of we're recording February 15th, and you said it, Nobles, Williston, Andover, Deerfield, Loomis, Kent, Tabor, St. Paul's. That's the Elite Eight as of February 15th, according to USHR's playoff
Yep.
seedings. Of those 5 through 8 teams, right? Loomis, Kent, Tabor, St. Paul's. Do you see a team in there that could make a run that could potentially upset a higher seed? I mean, a 5 beating a 4 isn't always like the
Yeah.
craziest upset, but it's still an upset. Is there any team in there that you see as an upset contender?
I think Loomis for sure. They have the win over Andover this year at the Auden tournament. They have some other really quality wins, whether it's Westminster, they've beaten Tabor, they've beaten Kent. They've proven probably to be the best of that secondary grouping. Um, and even their loss to Deerfield was tight 2-1. They've
Mhm.
beaten Choate. Um, so I would say Loomis is, I think, maybe the deepest offensively. And just the track record this season, probably the best of the rest. I mean, Tabor, it's tough to count out because they're just always hanging around. And we talked about how like yeah, scoring's been a little up and down in the second half, but their defense is so good, especially with Adeline Paskowski and Caitlin Sullivan, just two of the very best in the NEPSAC. So we talk about defense and goaltending, how important it is in the postseason, and that could be the X factor for Tabor. I don't. Kent's really interesting because they just haven't played as many games as the rest. They have 10 wins. They're 10-3-2. You're looking at the rest of the Elite Eight. You got obviously Nobles is 20, but then 17, 15, 16, 17. Um, they haven't, they just, they're tough to get a gauge on because of how short their schedule has been. Um,
Mhm.
and they had a tough stretch, kind of around the holidays and start of January, 1-3-2. They were 1-3 to start January. Losses to Loomis and Wilson, which obviously you lose to Loomis and Wilson, nobody's really upset
Yeah.
with you. But they're just an interesting to try and get a read on. Especially where I haven't seen them this year, because obviously the cancellation with Nobles never happened again.
Right.
Um,
It
yeah,
never happened.
so
Yeah. So it's interesting. We talk a lot about games at the end of seasons, and I had this thought. I was watching Brunswick and Salisbury on the boys' side on Wednesday night, and Brunswick won 4-3. Brunswick came back in the third period, scored four straight goals to win. It was a big win, and it's interesting because if the Elite Eight began on Wednesday, those two teams were a 4-5. They would play each other in the
mhm,
Elite Eight quarterfinals. And I remember last season, I was at both games. Milton played Belmont Hill I think it was around now this time last year, and Milton embarrassed them, like just crushed them. I think it was like it was 6-2 or something. It was a big win for Milton, and it basically solidified their standing as hosting a Elite Eight game come the
yeah,
quarterfinal. And who did they host in the first round in the quarterfinal? But Belmont Hill, and Belmont Hill went in with an agenda and crushed them, and they're rivals. So you have to take that into consideration. But I do always kind of worry, and again, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I always worry about those teams that get wins at the end of the season over a team they could play in the Elite Eight. And I know you
yeah,
can't like intentionally lose because that you don't do it like that, but you sort of light a fire under those teams, and you can never know. You right, like you don't know what the seeding is going to be, so you can't like take a game off. I'm not advocating for that, but it's just kind of how chance works. And so it's interesting to hear you say like Loomis had that win over Andover, I think you said,
yeah,
earlier in the season. And it kind of hits at the point of like, can they do it again? Can you repeat that potentially against a team as good as Andover? It's funny because I had once had a boys coach say to me, who's on an Elite Eight team or a team that's always in the mix for the bottom of the Elite Eight, top of one of the other tournaments. And
mhm,
he was saying how, like, we're always good enough to win one Elite Eight game, but are we good enough to win three straight in the span of like 5 days? And I think
yep,
that's the dilemma that all five or the four back half of the Elite Eight teams have, both boys and girls. Can you win three games like that in the span in such a short span? And I think with the girls, it's especially true because Nobles, Williston, and Andover, I kind of put in their own tier. So it does, I
yeah,
think, become tougher for those other teams.
yeah. I agree, and especially like where again where maybe some limited schedules, especially for Kent, where like they haven't really played that. Or like obviously they played Tabor, Andover, obviously Westminster, Loomis, and Wilson. But you know, aside from like Choate in the last month of the season, you're of like Elite Eight caliber teams, you're really only seeing Choate and Westminster.
Mhm.
So it's like that battle tested mentality sort of, and then even then, like when you look at elsewhere, you have Andover beating Wilson, where like Andover had that game on their calendar since the moment the season ended last year, losing to
Yep.
Wilson in the title game. Like you, so I mean, it's like we talked about, bulletin board material where even if it hasn't been that season, memories are long.
They are. And I think that's one of the things on the girls' side, because a lot of these teams, Nobles and Williston have a history, Williston and Andover have a history. And then you've some of these other teams at the bottom of the Elite Eight that want to get in.
Yeah,
So I
even if
get
Nobles and say St. Paul's sticks in as the 8th seed, they get Nobles first. St. Paul's lost to Nobles in the Harrington title game. I think they lost to him again recently. Um, really gonna let a team beat you twice in one season?
that's the thing.
Yeah. So
That's the thing. It's hard again. It's hard to lose to it's hard for two good teams to play each other and that team to win 2 or 3 times in one year. It's
like
it's
BU
why
and
like
BC.
exactly. Yeah, okay. Exactly. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly it. But let's switch to boys quickly. Or for a while. Let's do boys for a little while.
Yeah.
So as of today, again, February 15th, we're recording. Elite 8, Kimball Union 1, Cushing 2, Avon 3, Brunswick 4, Salisbury 5, Holderness 6, St. George's 7, and Nobles at 8.
Hey, it's Bobby Moran, Director of Athletics at Thayer Academy. You know what? Experience matters, and Thayer Academy's professional coaching staff understands how to work with each student athlete to help them succeed. Our coaches and faculty are committed to ensuring both 5th to 12th graders feel known, connected, and prepared. This is Thayer's secret sauce, nurturing each student to reach their full potential. Here, success is truly a team sport. Are you ready for your child to take the next step? See what Thayer has to offer at thayer.org. That's THAYER.org.
Do you want to skate fast? For 50 years, Laura Stam instructors have taught youth players to pros how to skate correctly, powerfully, and fast. Players who attend Laura Stam power skating programs learn how to skate fast by learning how to execute every maneuver in hockey. They become powerful, stable, efficient, and explosively fast skaters. If you can't wait for a clinic, join our subscription skills video service, and we'll show you the skills taught at our clinics in an easy-to-use video format with training plans to guide your training. Register or subscribe now at laurastam.com. That's LauraStamm.com. You can learn to skate fast.
Prepare for the next level at Cushing Academy. Coach Pearl here, varsity boys hockey coach at Cushing Academy. If you're looking for the complete boarding school experience that combines elite level boys and girls hockey and a huge range of classes, look no further than Cushing. With a program that has produced more than 70 professional and Olympic athletes, there's never been a better time to prepare for the next level with the Penguins. Visit Cushing.org to register for a tour of the Cushing campus today. Roll Pens.
Hi, my name is Chris Santello. I'm the owner and president of Impact Hockey Consulting. After seeing and hearing how poorly hockey players and their parents were being advised with false hope and direction over the years, I decided to start Impact Hockey Consulting with a vision to help hockey players and families through their hockey journey. We do it the right way with an honest assessment and feedback of where they are in their hockey career. At Impact Hockey Consulting, we believe every player should be treated with the utmost respect and honesty to support their needs throughout their path. At IHC, we specialize in advising, mentoring, player development, video analysis, and the proper placement for each player. I welcome all RinkWise listeners to reach out. I'm eager to hear from you and learn more about where you are and want to be in hockey. Please visit our website, impacthockeyconsulting.com, to set up a call today.
Teams at the top. I think Kimball Union is the best team in the region. I've said this multiple times. I saw Cushing play Brunswick at UConn, by the way. I'd never been to the new UConn rink.
Oh, yeah.
Heck of a rink. That's a perfect place to watch a college hockey game. There's not a lot of seats. It's like, you feel like you're on top of the action. There's a lot of concourse room. There's a lot of windows, so you get the good lighting. That's a great rink. And there's a lot of parking too. So I was a fan of that rink. Really good rink. But I saw Cushing there play Brunswick, and Cushing was the better team at 5-on-5 for sure. But with Cushing, it's interesting because they have such a talented roster and they're deep. Like people are always asking me, like, is the Cushing team better from last year or this year? And I've said this, I think, on this podcast before. Cushing last year, I think, had the better overall players. Like they had the star power. Landon Resendez, Ethan Gardula. I think they had a little more of that last year. I think they're deeper this year. I think that they have. I mean, they can run any 4 of their forward lines. They can run any 7 of their defensemen, and they usually a lot of times have a mismatch. They can, and Billick in net is, I would say, definitely a top 3 goalie in prep, if not the top one. I think it's him, probably Ryder Shea from St. George's, and Sam Caulfield from Milton. If I'm missing any, I might be missing some people, but just off the top of my head, those 3 come to mind. But Kimball Union is, I put a little above Cushing because Kimball Union star players are a little bit better. Sadowski and Ledrew and Simmers have been outstanding. O'Sullivan and McMinn on the back end. That's a like Kimball. I saw Kimball Union play Holderness. I've seen Kimball Union at other times this year, and they just kind of have it. They just have it. And so I would put Kimball Union slightly above Cushing in that. I just think if I got to win one game and it's between those two teams, my gut says Kimball Union. Now, Pat, here's the tough part. Starting Friday, February 16th and the 17th, Cushing and KUA play back-to-back. One game at KUA, one game at Cushing. I plan on being at the Cushing game. That's a big test. I'm fascinated to see what happens because if they split, then it's like, okay, don't really know who the better team is unless it's like one game's a blowout and the other's close and the other team narrowly pushes through. But if one team wins both games, it goes back to what we just said, right? Like if Cushing wins both those games or KUA wins both those games, if they play each other in the Elite Eight, is that team who lost both of those games, are they going to lose again? So I think that's something we got to consider with that matchup, right?
Yeah. And I know like a question I would ask you, and the schedule is the schedule. You can't control that. But you've talked about the Lakes region and kind of being, a little top heavy this year with KUA and Holderness. Do you worry about strength of schedule for Kimball Union?
I do. I definitely, there's that part of it. And the numbers can be inflated on some of these players, right? Like Sadowski has 71 points in 30 games. That is
holy cow.
There has not been so I need to go back and do the research on this. I don't think there was a 60-point getter in prep since, God, it was pre-pandemic. I think it was like either 18-19 or 19-20. It's been that long since there was a 60-point getter. 70 is probably even longer, or it's around the same time. But Sadowski has 71. Ledrew has 60. Some kids from Holderness like Van Wee and Mera, I think they're 53 and 51, so they're not quite at 60 yet. Sadowski and Ledrew have been dominant. So this is where the Lakes region thing comes in. Because Sadowski and Ledrew together, and Simmers as well, I don't want to leave him out, have been dominant. But you're right. They have also, again, when you're playing, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, when you're beating St. Paul's 10-0, and you're beating Tilton 14-6, and Vermont Academy 7-0, and Brewster Academy 11-1, that you're going to inflate the numbers. Like that's what happens. I'm not taking anything away because Sadowski still put up a 4-point game against Holderness the first time they played. He had a great game against St. Andrews College, so I'm not saying that. But you're right. I mean, playing those teams doesn't battle test you as much as a Cushing who, will play a Brunswick or teams like that. Now, in terms of confidence, KUA is going to go in with as much confidence as anybody because they know they can curb stomp whoever they'd like because they've done that all year. So I think it works against them at times, like for this 3-week stretch, for this 3-game stretch when the Elite Eight starts and they've got to play, let's just looking at the seedings now, Nobles on Wednesday, and then I don't know, Salisbury, Holderness, or St. George's on Saturday, and then another team on Sunday. It's not easy. But yeah, I think that is potentially where Cushing could have an advantage over a team like KUA is that.
Yeah. Very quickly, I found the last time there was a 70-point scorer.
Oh, who was it and what year was it?
2019-20, there were 4. You had Marcus, I hope I'm not butchering this, Joughin, Joughin, at New Hampton had 79 points,
Oh my God.
63 assists.
That's incredible. There were a lot of
to,
teammates who loved him that year.
yeah, Thomas Mazura at Kimball Union, 73, 60 assists. Sullivan Mack at KUA had 70, 44 goals. Wonder who
My
was feeding him
God.
the puck.
Oh
Um,
God.
and then Danny Ciccarello at St. Mark's, 70 points, 29 goals. And then you had 2 more in the 60s. You had Alex Jeffries with 69. It was his second year in a row with at least 60 points.
Okay.
He had 33 goals. Then you had Isaac McLeod at New Hampton, had 65 points, 39 goals. Again, wonder who was feeding him the puck.
A lot of Lakes region though. That's
Yeah.
interesting. I didn't know that.
So I'll just
Yeah.
double check here, make sure there wasn't one after the pandemic, but because
I
I
don't
went
think there
back pre-pandemic, like
was.
you said, but quite an offensive year.
It was, and it used and like you go back even further, the year that I think it was Jay O'Brien was like a Thayer. I think he had like 80 or something, just
Yeah.
bananas. And I think that's a whole nother topic, and that's why like it's interesting with Sadowski putting up as many points as he has. He is an NHL draft prospect. I think he's lower ranked in Central Scouting. I think he's our 12th ranked locally. But if he continues to produce like this, I know there are a lot of teams who are looking at him going, huh, that's a lot. It's a lot of points.
Yeah.
Is he worth a 6th or 7th round pick? So I think that's going to be an interesting thing with him. But yeah, in terms of the teams themselves with KU, like I think KU is going to enter with a ton of confidence. Even with that tough schedule. It's interesting. Holderness also kind of suffers from like, oh, they kill everybody because they're in the Lakes region. Now, Holderness lost to KUA twice. They've been swept by them. I was at the first game. I was not at that second game at KUA when KUA beat them 2-0 last weekend. But I think, Holderness lost to KUA twice. They did beat Cushing. But the schedule is not as difficult as some others. And you know what? That's I guess partially on them. I think, you do want to play some teams outside of your conference, which they have. They go to the Lawrence Groton tournament. But it's also not their fault in that it's not their fault that teams in the Lakes region had down years this year. Like
Your
that's
schedule
not
is your schedule.
Your schedule's your schedule. Your division's your division. It's the same with the MIAA,
Yep.
So it's not their fault. It's not, Tim Whitehead and Alan Thompson's fault for scheduling Tilton when they're in their division. So I don't hold that against them, but it does play against them, I think, sometimes when it comes to comparing them with other teams. In terms of some of the others in the Elite Eight that are interesting, I've talked a lot about St. George's as a team that I think could make some noise. They would be slated to play Cushing if the Elite Eight began today. And I think St. George is going to be a tough out. Ryder Shea is a great goalie and out with something to prove. Had a down year last year. St. George's had a really down year last year as a whole. They're big. They're a big team. And I think in a 1-game elimination playoff type atmosphere, sometimes those big guys can wreak some havoc. And it would not shock me if St. George's upset a team in the first round. I think that, Ryder Shea gets hot. They move the puck well. I've mentioned this before. So I don't want to repeat myself, but I think to me, they're the Elite Eight sleeper team in that bottom tier. And if they get an Avon, Avon, technically has not lost a game in regulation yet this year. Big game coming up on Saturday against Salisbury, which is kind of their last big test before things kick off for the playoffs. But to me, I think St. George's could upset someone. Another team, Pat, who's back in the mix? Who is back from the dead? I'm not into
back
wrestling.
from the jinx.
Yeah, back from the jinx. They've well, not quite yet. They're not quite back from the jinx yet, but remember that it's like a GIF that people always tweet of the wrestler coming out.
Yeah,
of the
the
coffin.
Undertaker.
The Undertaker. Yeah, I'm not a wrestling guy, but the Undertaker. That's Sebs.
Yeah.
So Sebs in the last bit here, Sebs had a really rough stretch. They lost to Andover 7-6 in overtime. back on January 17th. They tied Thayer and they lost to Tabor. I thought, at the end of January, I was like, all right, they're probably done. Like they're probably going to be a low seed in the large school in the large school. And, we'll see what happens, but, kind of go off the radar. Ever since, it's been good. Beat Milton, beat St. Mark's, beat a very good Belmont Hill team, beat a very good Lawrence team, and beat Tabor. And they're winning with a lot of goals. Teddy Mutron's back. That offense seems to be churning. And they are the 9th seed right now. They're right outside the Elite 8. Now, it's so unfortunate that Nobles and Sebs don't play again. They've gone 1-1. They've already played this year, but it would be awesome if they were playing in the final weeks. They are not. It's interesting though, because Sebs could sneak in. They are right there in terms of RPI. Nobles is 0.5744. Sebs is 0.5751. I don't know why Sebs isn't above them, just going off that. I don't understand the whole algorithm.
Yeah.
It comes down to matchups, so there's other little things in it that, we can't see. But Sebs could make a final run. And if Sebs got in, again, I'm dying on this hill. I am dying on this hill, Pat. If Sebs got in, I think they could make a run because they've been splitting Pele Russo and Cam Karkner and net. Cam Karkner, by the way, congratulations to him, just committed to Middlebury College to play there. If they got in, I think they're a hard out. That's a freaking dynamite offense. And, again, they have something to prove. They're getting hot. If they sneak in as an 8 seed and they play KUA in the first round, that's an interesting matchup. I don't pick Sebs. It'd be hard to pick Sebs over KUA, but that's a very interesting matchup that if that did take place, I think that would be that could be pretty seismic to the whole bracket. So,
yeah. And even you talk about the offense where that's the explosiveness you want, dude. You could just pop off at any moment in a single elimination type of atmosphere. The thing that would worry me about that though would be when you see this in MIAA and then even a little bit in prep, when teams rotate the goalies and it comes down to one game, who do you go with?
That's the thing.
That's
the problem.
That's what worries me because there's always whether it's, the players wouldn't second guess, but there's always a little bit of doubt. Did you pick the right one?
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
So that always even Bruins or Franklin was rotating their goalies and he had Burns and lost 6-1 to Marshfield, pulled the goalie in the third period. So,
yeah, Karkner's been better than Russo this year, numbers wise, like a 920 save percentage for Karkner, 206 GAA. Russo struggled at times. I know that Karkner kind of took over for a bit. And good to see Russo kind of get back in the mix and playing all right of late. But again, it just kind of hits that. I agree with you. Are all the questions answered come the playoffs? Do you know who your goalie is going to be? Do you trust your defense? Is your offense going to show up? I think those are all valid questions. And I think Seb's playoff history is not anything special. We talked about that a lot in the magazine story, and we thought, all right, this team's going to be the one to do it. They still could. You have the seniors, you have the firepower. But to me, that's a team that's kind of the makings of an upset team. They could get bounced in the first round quickly. That could easily happen. But I think it's just as possible as they make a run or at least upset a team or two. So to me, if I'm a top seed in the Elite 8, I'm kind of hoping Sebs doesn't make it because I think Sebs just has that sort of makeup. Nobles is a good team. I think Nobles is great. Tyler Bloomfield also recently committed to Hamilton College, so congratulations to him. Good goalie, good team. I just don't think they have the same firepower that Sebs does. Maybe a little more structured, which I think helps. Probably a little bit better in net. But I think, going up against a KUA team, I would take Sebs over Nobles in terms of beating KUA. But again, Nobles, Kyle O'Leary, Teddy McCausland, Dennis Davidson, they have a good forward group. They've got a reliable D-core. So it wouldn't surprise me if they got in because Nobles, the rest of their schedule is what is it? Today's the 15th. They have Belmont Hill on Friday, which is a big game. Governors, and then Milton. So, if they take care of business, they should probably stay in. But that's not a guarantee that they're going to take care of business because Belmont Hill is a good team. In terms of other teams that could sneak in, like Lawrence Academy is on the cusp. They're a good team. Seniors. I still don't get how Owen Leahy's not committed anywhere yet. 45 points in 23 games. Patty, I don't think you've seen Lawrence yet this year.
I have not.
Owen Leahy plays. Every team should want an Owen Leahy guy who just goes to the dirty areas. He's not flashy, but he just gets the freaking job done. And do you remember that episode of
Type
Seinfeld?
of kid that thrives in college.
Yes, a type of kid that you want in like your bottom six in college.
Like a 4-year player, probably
Yup.
be like a top sixer by his senior year. Like
yes,
like
it.
obviously going off like my BU experience, but like Patrick Curry, that type of player.
Perfect. Yep, that's exactly it. Remember that episode of Seinfeld? You'll enjoy this, and hopefully our listeners who love Seinfeld will get this. The episode where Kramer starts working at Brent Leland, and Jerry's like, "What do you do all day?"
Yeah.
And Kramer's like, "TCB, taking care of business." Like Owen Leahy just takes care of business. That's all he does. And he works hard, and he's got a high compete. And I'm surprised that he does not have a commitment yet. I think one's going to come at some point, I would think, the way he plays. But they're a team that could get in. They have Brendan Hirsch, Spencer Hirsch, Sean Leary on D, Colin Beliveau and net. So they're a team that could maybe sneak in. Right now, in terms of the JSPR, which kind of like ranks the teams for the Elite Eight, Dexter is number 10. Dexter's an interesting one because Dexter kind of struggled at the start of the year. They've sort of turned it around of late, but they also lost to Andover and New Hampton. I think they've lost 2 of their last 3. So they've turned it around in the second half, but they've had their ups and downs. So I probably see them not making it, being in one of the other tournaments. So, but they would be another one that I think you got to kind of watch in these final 2 weeks. So we'll see. Berkshire also is another very pleasant surprise. Berkshire, I remember writing about last year when Kevin Sepiel was announced that he'd take over for Dan Driscoll. And I remember Kevin just being like, the sky's the limit. There's so much we can do at Berkshire. And they've done that. They're 18-8, third seed in the large school tournament. So they're on the cusp. And Canterbury's had a really good season too. I predict they're probably going to still be the number 1 seed, excuse me, in the small school. So, yeah, I think that's sort of the rundown of for boys prep. Do you have any observations or questions on that stuff?
No, I mean, everything that I sort of brought up, whether it was, strength of schedule or even with Seb's goalies, it's kind of everything I had.
Yeah. I mean, like Salisbury, I guess, is another team I want to kind of touch on real quick. I was not super impressed with them at the Floodmar. They have gotten really hot in the second half, which is, again, Andrew Will's teams love finding themselves in the second half. They lost a tough one to Brunswick on Wednesday, but, I would say they controlled the first 2 periods. Salisbury looked really good, very structured. Brunswick just brought it. And that's my thing about Brunswick is I think, Brunswick's a day school. So for Brunswick to get in to the Elite Eight as a top seed is very impressive. And it's impressive when they can go out and almost beat Cushing and beat Salisbury and beat schools that recruit from outside of their area and have boarding students. But Brunswick is just so scrappy and they're resilient. They don't give up. And that's why to me, we'll do our predictions at some point, for the Elite Eight when the time comes around of, what we think will happen. And we'll do predictions each round. But Brunswick's going to be a tough out. And they were tough out last year, but that's their makeup. Mike Kennedy has them like that. And then you have Salisbury, though, with Andrew Will, and they're a tough out. So, to me, it goes back to what I mentioned earlier. Excuse me. I'm getting over a cold. It's in my chest right now for some reason. I guess I'm talking too much. It goes back to what I just said earlier about with the girls of teams playing late in the season. Brunswick beat Salisbury late in the year. Brunswick kind of embarrassed them a bit, came back, had them blow their lead in the third period. That's going to be in Salisbury's head come the playoffs. If the Elite Eight stays the same, which it might not, Cushing plays Kimball Union this weekend. Avon plays Salisbury. We'll see what happens with the bottom seeds. But if it did stay the same, can Brunswick win 2 in a row against Salisbury? Salisbury's a good team. It's hard to beat Salisbury twice in a year. So that's kind of where I go back to it's dangerous with those end of season games. Can't avoid them, but they're there. So
yeah.
I think we've kind of hit on all of it with the Elite Eight. I think we've done a good Elite Eight look at all these teams. So next week we're going to do with prep. We'll do a prep preview, girls and boys. We'll look at right before the brackets come out. We'll look at kind of how the tournaments are looking, and we'll kind of discuss some of the teams, especially in the large and small school, because we didn't touch on them as much in this episode. And then we're going to have a full MIA podcast coming up soon as well, where we discuss the brackets, how it's looking, and we'll dive deep on that. So I know a lot of MIAA listeners are probably not thrilled. They're like, talk about MIAA. We will. We promise. We're going to do a lot of MIAA talk, but we wanted to kind of take some time to look and take a deep dive on the Elite Eight. Are you ready to elevate your game and education? The New Hampshire Mountain Kings program is a new and unique hockey experience located in central New Hampshire. The ownership group operates the newly renovated Tri-Town Ice Arena in Hooksett, New Hampshire. The arena is the home of the North American Hockey League New Hampshire Mountain Kings as they compete in their inaugural season. The New Hampshire Mountain Kings Academy and Mountain Cat Academy were created with a desire to enhance the typical hockey academy experience for both male and female participants. In 2024, the Mountain King Academy will have teams competing at the U14, U15, U16, and 18 levels, while the Mountain Cats will compete at the U19 level. The students will attend school in person at Bishop Brady High School and stay in secure dormitories with meal plans at NHTI and Concord, New Hampshire. For information on how to become a Mountain King, contact them today at info@nhmountainkings.com. Again, that's info@nhmountainkings.com.
Do you want to become a better hockey player this summer with Paul Vincent Hockey? Since 1972, Paul Vincent, currently the head skills instructor of the Florida Panthers, has been developing NHL and college hockey players. Paul Vincent stands by his saying, there's always room for player development. Players such as Patrick Kane, Jonathan Taves, Keith Yandel, Matt Grzelcyk, Patrick Sharp, Adam Oates, and many more have trained with Coach Vincent and his staff and have outstanding results. Join Paul Vincent this summer at one of his 4 Massachusetts locations, Canton, Saugus, Middleton, and Falmouth on Cape Cod. To reserve your spot today, go to pvhockey.com or call 978-807-4070. That's pvhockey.com or call 978-807-4070. Paul Vincent is ready to get back to work this summer. Are you?
For over 20 years, Eric Nate's Euro Hockey has been helping hockey players of all ages develop their individual skills and improve on all aspects of their game. Through structured drills and innovative training equipment, Eric Nate's Euro Hockey's intense on-ice instruction challenges each student to be the best at their ability. Find a hockey clinic or summer camp that is right for you today at nateshockey.com. That's Nates hockey.com. Eric Nate's Euro Hockey, trained to be the best.
Prepare for the next level at Cushing Academy. Coach Pearl here, varsity boys hockey coach at Cushing Academy. If you're looking for the complete boarding school experience that combines elite level boys and girls hockey and a huge range of classes, look no further than Cushing. With a program that has produced more than 70 professional and Olympic athletes, there's never been a better time to prepare for the next level with the Penguins. Visit Cushing.org to register for a tour of the Cushing campus today. Roll Pens.
But before we go, Pat, as always, we can't leave without our great producer, David Yaz, doing overtime.
Overtime. Yes, welcome back to Overtime. And last week, as a special edition of Overtime, we did a fantasy hockey draft of celebrities, you'll recall. You both lost somehow, but it was a lot of fun, and so I thought, can we do another draft? And in a manner of speaking, this will be a draft, or if you prefer, a chirp off. We're going to have you pick from the greatest hockey chirps ever. So you guys know what a chirp is, right?
Oh, of course, yes.
And I think most of our listeners do as well. So the way this is going to work is round one. There'll be 5 rounds of this. You get 5 chirps each, okay? And you're going to pick from a selection of chirps, which I've put on the screen here. And Evan, you get to go first. So round one, if you need to chirp to a player who has a full face shield helmet, what would you say, Evan?
All of these are so good that in the heat of a moment of a game, I don't know if I could remember an entire sentence like this. But nice fishbowl, you find Nemo yet is a great one. I think that would exactly. That's how when you give out a chirp, you imagine the laugh track in the background. So I'm glad you added that. That's a good one though. That's a good one. It makes you self-conscious. That's the point of a chirp.
That's right. All right, Pat, you've got 2 remaining to choose from on the board.
So I'd never heard of the Nemo one before. That's funny because I always like to try and get a laugh out of my teammates when I was chirping. I got to go with the tried and true. Roll your window down. Can't hear you.
Good one.
That's a classic.
That is a very good one. All right. Round 2. If you need to chirp to a goalie, what would you say? I've got 3 on the board here. Pat, you get to go first this time.
Oh, I think this one's easy. The coupons. I've got coupons that save more than you.
Yeah!
Good one. The crowd likes that one. Evan, your turn.
The Titanic line's killer. You're like the Titanic. You look good until you hit the ice. I mean, that is a great. I am all for comparing players on the ice to tragedies in human history. So I am very pro Titanic line. That's a good one.
All right, we've got 3 rounds left. This is where it gets exciting because you can pick from anything on this list. And the video, YouTube viewers can see them all. The home listeners for podcast, you're just going to be kept in suspense. So we'll go back to you, Evan. Round 3, deliver a chirp to your opponent.
Oh, there's so many. God. I guess a good one is actually, hey man, can I borrow your hands? I need a stone for my skates. I think that's a good one. That
excellent.
Hits the stone hands. I like that. That's good. I like that.
All right. Pat, your turn.
I'm gonna go with my Jack and Coke gets more ice than you.
Did you come up with these? Yes.
No. These are culled from various sources on the internet, and certain chirps have been removed in the interest of decorum.
It's a family podcast.
That's right.
It is.
That's
another good one. Real quick, you're gonna make a great coach someday. The worst players always do. That is like it would take some real thinking.
Why are you going out of order, Evan? All right.
I thought we have more. Okay.
Yes. That'll count for your next one. So
okay.
Well done. Yeah. Kids like that one. All right. Yeah. Which one did you say? Say that one again, Evan.
I said you're gonna make a great coach someday. The worst players always do.
That's a good one. Okay. Pat, your turn.
And
then you'll each have one.
I'm between 2. I'm gonna go another like classic that you can't really, nobody really has an answer for. But does your coach know you're out here?
Yeah.
How did they let you? How did you get out here?
That's good
they
for
know you're not on the bench.
It's good for a face off too. You just put your mug right in his mug and say,
"There's no response to that. Nobody has a comeback for that."
That's right. All right, you just get one more before we wrap up here. Evan, your final chirp.
I'm gonna go simple. You suck at hockey. Just right to the point. It doesn't take a lot of thought. Just you suck at hockey. It's just right to the point.
I do like that one.
Home, and it does what it has to do.
Yep.
It's another one. Like, what are you supposed to say to that? Like, oh, you do too.
No, yeah. I don't. Okay, I don't. So I like that one.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, Pat, your final chirp.
I'll go with I've heard better chirps from a dead bird.
Oh. Well done. Well done. For the goaltender, I'm surprised neither one of you went with the Geico one. Hey, Tendy, switch to Geico. You'll save more. That's topical. And let's see. Well, the Justin Bieber one's, at least it's Canadian. Your flow is worse than a Justin Bieber mixtape. That's all right. Anyway, I'm going to declare it a tie because that's the way all hockey games end. No, just kidding. Congratulations to you both, chirping and not swearing once. That's not easy to do. And back to you, Evan, to wrap things up.
Yeah, I was gonna say with chirps, there's some dangerous ones that weren't on there. Thank God.
Yes.
Yep.
But I'll have to remember these. My men's league games sometimes get a little heated, so I'll have to remember some of those chirps. I'll keep like quarterbacks on their arm have the plays.
Yes.
I'll have the little pamphlet with chirps, just so I'll remember to say that next shift.
Yeah, get the flip model so you can double the amount of chirps that are on.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like a binder on my hand.
Right.
I was the worst. I was always yapping from the bench, but if I was actually on the ice in the heat of the moment, I'd like 10 minutes later be like, "Man, I should have said that."
That's the best one. I mean, that's
like I'd have them if I wasn't actually in it. If I wasn't actually in it, I'd have them ready. But
yeah, I'm telling you, players that can dish out awesome chirps and play really well impress me. Because to be able to do like a million things at once like that and still be nasty, like I respect that so much. I was not one of those people, so
yeah, it's like the ultimate mic drop.
It is, yeah. To remember that in the moment and then score a goal or like make a nice
bury
play.
one right in his face. Yeah,
I respect the heck out of it. Or who was it? Was it Radko Gudas last year for the Florida Panthers? Who after the Panthers scored the OT winner, he did something to the Toronto goalie. I forget what he did, but he went like right up and he got in his screamed in his face. That was what it was. It was screamed in his face. So that's not so much a chirp. It's just
what did he say? I wonder what he said. Yeah.
I don't even know if he said anything. He just was like, yeah, like right in his face, like inches from his cage. So that was good. But yeah, we kind of covered everything here. I like the chirps. I like the draft format. As of overtime. That works.
I'm going to have to keep getting creative because, you might have to be drafting the best NHL goons coming up next. That'd be all right.
That could work.
We'll see.
We could do it. Well, anyways, we got a lot coming in the next couple weeks. This might be our busiest couple weeks of the year in terms of prep playoff coverage, MIAA playoff coverage, end of the regular season, look backs at the season when it's over. So lots to come on the girls' side, on the boys' side, lots coming. And as always, that's been this episode of RinkWise. That's Patrick Donnelly. I'm Evan Marinofsky. RinkWise, the Seamans Media production. We will see you next time and have a great rest of your week.